There was a moment in history when an emperor looked at his own coins and decided to cheat. Not subtly, not carefully, boldly. He stamped his face where Christ's image had been, inflated the currency, and told the world his money was still worth the same. The markets didn't believe him. His officials didn't believe him. And within months, the empire that had survived plagues, invasions, and civil wars for centuries began tearing itself apart, not from enemy armies. Mobs stormed government offices. Soldiers stopped accepting pay. Trading networks that had held together for generations collapsed overnight. And the emperor who thought he could rewrite the rules of money? They cut off his nose in a public stadium, paraded him through the streets as a mutilated warning, replaced him with someone who understood what he'd forgotten. You can't lie about value forever. Eventually, the bill comes due. And when it does, legitimacy doesn't fade quietly. It explodes. Welcome to the Financial History Explained, where money, power, and history collide. And nothing is ever as simple as it looks. To understand how a coin destroyed an empire, you first have to understand the world it destroyed. In 692 AD, the Byzantine Empire wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. While Western Europe had collapsed into fragmented kingdoms ruled by illiterate warlords, Byzantium stood as the continuation of Rome itself. Constantinople was the largest, wealthiest city in Christendom. Its walls had never been breached. Its bureaucracy functioned with precision that wouldn't be matched in Europe for another 1,000 years. The core of it all was something most people today do unrealize. Byzantium ran on trust, not military trust, not religious trust, financial trust. The Byzantine gold solidus was the dollar of the medieval world. For 3 centuries, it had been the most stable currency on earth. Merchants in Baghdad accepted it. Traders in Venice hoarded it. Kings in distant kingdoms measured their wealth against it. The solidus didn't just represent value, it was value. It weighed exactly 4.5 grams of pure gold, and that weight never changed. Emperors came and went. Wars were won and lost. But the solidus remained constant, predictable, trustworthy. That consistency wasn't an accident. It was policy, and it was the foundation of Byzantine power. Because here, as what most people miss about medieval economics, gold wasn't just a store of wealth. It was the operating system of international trade. Without a stable currency, long-distance commerce collapsed. Merchants couldn't price goods. Contracts became meaningless. Trust evaporated. And when trust evaporated, so did tax revenue, military strength, and political legitimacy. The Byzantines understood this instinctively. The solidus wasn't just money. It was the empire's credibility in physical form. But maintaining that credibility was expensive. By the late 7th century, Byzantium was hemorrhaging gold. The empire had spent decades fighting simultaneous wars on multiple fronts against Persians to the east, Slavs to the north, and now a terrifying new enemy that had appeared seemingly out of nowhere, the Arab Caliphate. Within a single generation, Islamic armies had conquered Syria, Egypt, and North Africa territories that had been Roman for 7 centuries. The loss wasn't just territorial, it was financial. Egypt had been the breadbasket of the empire, feeding Constantinople and generating massive tax revenue. Syria had controlled critical trade routes. Losing them didn't just shrink the empire, it gutted its budget. And wars don't pause for budget shortfalls. Byzantine emperors faced an impossible equation. They needed to pay soldiers, rebuild fortifications, fund the navy, maintain the bureaucracy, and project strength to enemies who were watching for any sign of weakness. But the treasury was running dry. Tax revenues had collapsed. The gold mines that once supplied the empire were now in enemy hands. And borrowing wasn't an option. There was no international bond market, no IMF, no central bank to print money and hope for the best. In the medieval world, if you ran out of gold, you ran out of options. Most emperors would have raised taxes, cut spending, or negotiated peace. But in 692, the throne was occupied by a man who believed he had a better idea. His name was Justinian II, and he was 22 years old. Justinian wasn't a fool. He'd been raised in the palace, trained in statecraft, and crowned emperor at 16. He understood how empires worked, or at least, he thought he did. But he also inherited something dangerous. desperation mixed with absolute power. He looked at the empire's finances and saw a problem that couldn't be solved through conventional means. The gold wasn't there, the revenue wasn't there, but the need was immediate. So he did what rulers throughout history do when reality becomes inconvenient. He decided to change the definition of reality. In 692, Justinian II ordered a complete overhaul of Byzantine coinage. On the surface, it seemed like a minor administrative reform, the kind of thing bureaucrats handle quietly. But this wasn't minor. This was revolutionary, and it was catastrophic. For centuries, Byzantine coins had carried the image of the emperor on one side, and Christian symbols on the other, usually Christ, the Virgin Mary, or a cross. It was a visual contract. The emperor rules under divine authority, and the money is sacred. Justinian changed that. He ordered his face to replace Christ's image on the gold solidus, not alongside it, instead of it. He made himself the primary symbol on the currency, pushing religious imagery to secondary status. The message was clear. The emperor's authority supersedes even divine representation. It was a power move designed to centralize legitimacy around his person rather than shared religious tradition. But that wasn't the explosive part. Explosive part was what Justinian did to the gold itself. He debased the solidus. Dramatically, he wasn't stupid enough to turn gold into tin overnight. But he reduced the gold content slightly, mixing in more silver and copper, and then declared that the new coins had the same value as the old ones. Officially, nothing had changed. One solidus still equaled one solidus. The weight was nearly the same. The design was more impressive. And the emperor's authority was stamped directly onto the currency, backed by imperial decree. On paper, it was elegant. In reality, it was a fraud. Because here's the thing about currency debasement. It only works if no one notices, and everyone noticed. Merchants weren't idiots. They'd been handling solidi their entire lives. They knew what gold felt like, how it weighed, how it rang when dropped on a table. The new coins didn't ring the same, and they didn't weigh quite right. And when word spread that the emperor had altered the currency even slightly, the reaction wasn't confusion. I panicked, because if the emperor could change the value of money once, he could change it again and again. And once that precedent was set, every solidus in circulation became suspect. Was this coin from before the debasement or after? How much gold does it actually contain? Can I trust what the government says it's worth? Or do I need to weigh and test every transaction? In an economy built on long-distance trade and complex credit networks, that kind of uncertainty was poison. Within months, the consequences began to cascade. Merchants in the eastern provinces refused to accept the new coins at face value. They demanded payment in older solidi, or they discounted transactions to account for the reduced gold content. Foreign traders stopped honoring Byzantine currency altogether, insisting on weight-based exchanges instead of nominal value. The system that had allowed seamless commerce across the Mediterranean for centuries started to fracture. Not because the debasement was severe, it wasn't. Not yet, but because trust, once broken, is almost impossible to repair. And Justinian had just broken it in the most public, most visible way possible, by lying about the money itself. The markets rejected Justinian's coins, but markets don't riot, people do, and the people who rioted first weren't peasants or merchants. They were the ones Justinian needed most, his own officials. Because currency debasement doesn't just affect traders in distant ports, it affects everyone on a fixed salary and in Byzantium. That meant the entire imperial bureaucracy. Tax collectors, judges, military officers, palace administrators, all of them were paid in solidi. And overnight, their salaries were worth less, not on paper. On paper, everything looked fine. But in reality, when they tried to buy grain, oil, or cloth, merchants either refused the new coins or charged higher prices to compensate. The officials weren't stupid. They understood exactly what had happened. The emperor had effectively cut their pay while pretending he hadn't, and that created something far more dangerous than economic instability. It created resentment. Resentment among the people who ran the empire. In 695, just 3 years after the coin reform, a group of senior officials and military commanders decided they'd had enough. They didn't debate monetary policy. They didn't write petitions. They acted. They arrested Justinian II, dragged him to the Hippodrome, the massive public stadium in Constantinople, where 100,000 people could watch. And in front of a roaring crowd, they mutilated him. Not executed, mutilated. Byzantine law held that an emperor had to be physically perfect to rule. Mutilation was a way to disqualify someone from power permanently, so they cut off Justinian's nose. They slit his nostrils, disfigured his face, and made sure everyone in the empire knew he was no longer fit to wear the crown. Then they exiled him to the edge of the empire in Crimea, installed a new emperor, a general named Leontios, who immediately promised to restore the old currency standards. It should have ended there. A bad emperor removed, the currency stabilized. Order restored. But it didn't end there, because the precedent had been set. And once you prove that an emperor can be overthrown for financial mismanagement, the floodgates open. Leontios ruled for 3 years before he, too, was overthrown, this time by another general, Tiberius III, who accused him of failing to restore economic confidence quickly enough. Tiberius also had Leontios mutilated, cutting off his nose in the same public ritual, and took the throne. But Tiberius couldn't stabilize the currency either, because the problem wasn't just the coins anymore. The problem was trust. And trust, once shattered, doesn't return just because a new face sits on the throne. Foreign merchants still refused Byzantine currency. Domestic inflation continued. The military, already demoralized by pay cuts disguised as monetary reform, began losing battles they should have won. And the provinces watching. Constantinople descended into chaos, started questioning whether the capital had any authority left at all. But here's where the story takes a turn most people don't expect. Because Justinian II wasn't done. 10 years after being mutilated and exiled, Justinian did something almost no one in history has ever managed. He came back, in 705, with the help of foreign allies and loyalists who still believed in his claim. He marched an army back to Constantinople, overthrew Tiberius III, and reclaimed the throne. He ruled for another 6 years, this time even more paranoid, even more brutal, and even more determined to prove he'd been right all along. He didn't restore the old currency standards. He doubled down. He executed officials who had opposed him. He purged the bureaucracy. He burned rivals alive inside massive bronze statues shaped like bulls, turning executions into public spectacles meant to terrify anyone who questioned his authority. And when his enemies finally overthrew him for good in 711, they didn't just mutilate him. They killed him, killed his son, and made sure no one from his line could ever claim the throne again. 20 years. 3 emperors mutilated, dozens of officials executed, an entire generation of political stability destroyed, and all started with a coin. This wasn't a collapse caused by barbarians at the gates. It wasn't a plague or a famine or a foreign invasion, though all of those problems got worse because the empire was too distracted by internal chaos to respond. This was a collapse caused by a single financial decision that broke the one thing empires could and survive without: legitimacy. Because here's the deeper truth that Justinian never understood, and that every failing state eventually learns too late. Money is not just a tool, it's a promise. When you issue currency, you're not just printing metal or paper. You're making a contract with everyone who uses it. You're saying this represents value. You can trust it. You can plan your life around it. And when you break that promise, when you debase the currency, you lie about its value. You tell people their savings are still worth the same, while quietly stealing purchasing power. Not just committing economic fraud, you're committing political suicide. Because once people stop trusting the money, they stop trusting the institution that issues it. And once they stop trusting the institution, legitimacy evaporates, not gradually, explosively. The Byzantine Empire survived the crisis of 692, but it never fully recovered. The period of chaos weakened it so severely that it spent the next century struggling to regain stability. The solidus, once the gold standard of the medieval world, never quite reclaimed its former reputation. Merchants remembered, markets remembered. And the lesson was clear. Even the most powerful empires can collapse if they lie about the one thing everyone depends on: money. And this is where the story stops being about 7th century Byzantium and starts being uncomfortably modern, because currency debasement didn't end with Justinian II. It's one of the oldest tricks in the government playbook, repeated across centuries, continents, and political systems. Rome did it with the denarius, turning silver into tin over generations until soldiers refused to fight for worthless coins. Revolutionary France did it with the assignats, printing paper money backed by nothing until bread riots tore Paris apart. The Confederacy did it during the American Civil War, inflating their currency into irrelevance. Weimar Germany did it in the 1920s, creating hyperinflation so severe that people used banknotes as wallpaper. Zimbabwe did it in the 2000s, printing trillion-dollar bills that couldn't buy a loaf of bread. Every time, the logic is the same. The government faces a crisis. Revenue isn't enough. Borrowing isn't enough. So they expand the money supply, debase the currency, or print more bills, and they insist, loudly and officially, that nothing has changed. $1 still equals $1. One solidus still equals one solidus. The numbers stay the same, only the value disappears. And every time, the result is the same. Markets panic, prices rise, trust collapses. And the people holding the currency, workers, savers, retirees, anyone on a fixed income watch, their wealth evaporate while the government pretends everything is fine. Today, we don't shave gold off coins. We don't need to. We have central banks, quantitative easing, and balance sheets measured in trillions. When modern governments need money, they don't debase physical currency. They expand the money supply digitally, injecting liquidity into the system and insisting it's necessary for stability. And maybe it is. Maybe the alternative is worse. But the underlying dynamic hasn't changed. When you create more money without creating more value, purchasing power dilutes, savings erode. The people who benefit are rarely the ones who needed help in the first place. The difference between Justinian and today's policymakers isn't the mechanism, it's the speed. Justinian's debasement was immediate, and visible people could weigh the coins and see the fraud. Modern monetary expansion is slower, quieter, harder to measure in real time. Inflation creeps rather than explodes. But the outcome is structurally identical. Wealth transfers from those who hold currency to those who control assets, from savers to debtors, from workers to owners, from the bottom to the top. And just like in Byzantium, the people affected don't always revolt immediately. They adapt, they cope, they assume it's temporary. But underneath, resentment builds, trust erodes, and eventually legitimacy fractures, not in a single dramatic collapse, but in a slow hollowing out of confidence that leaves institutions brittle, populations cynical, and systems vulnerable to shocks they once could have absorbed. The lesson Justinian learned too late is the same lesson every empire eventually learns. You can lie about value for a while, can manipulate the numbers, control the narrative, and insist everything is fine, but reality doesn't negotiate. Markets will eventually reflect the truth. People will eventually notice. When they do, the damage isn't just economic, it's existential. It's because money isn't just about wealth, it's about trust. Trust is the only asset that truly holds empires together. Lose it, and you don't just lose stability, you lose the right to rule. Justinian thought he could rewrite the rules. He thought his authority was absolute, that his word could define value, that he could bend reality to fit his needs. And for a brief moment, it looked like he might be right. But in the end, the markets didn't care about his authority. The officials didn't care about his decrees. The people didn't care about his justifications. They cared about whether the money in their hands was real, and when it wasn't, they tore the empire apart. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it'll cost you all the same. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers, and I'll show you where to look.